In this program, we're going to take a look at how we're going to accomplish user input. Some programming languages have this built in. Others require you to use some additional method to accomplish this. So in Java here, what we're going to do is we are going to import a class with additional code that is going to let us do user input. So we're going to start with an import line here. So make sure that this is above public class main. So main is a class, much like what we're about to import. So all of these are going to take place at the beginning of the program. So we're going to go import java.util for utilities scanner. The name of it is the scanner. So in this program, we're going to do a very simple calculate perimeter, just because this should be a familiar task. So we're going to use an integer value of the length of a rectangle. We'll use a double value of the width. Now, there's a particular reason, just to demonstrate something, why we're making one of them an integer value and one of them a double. We'll have a double perimeter value, which we will be calculating. And underneath that, I'm just going to skip a few lines because I'll put some notes in here. We're going to have two string values, so string name and string shape. Maybe we'll change this to shape name. Okay, so what you might notice here is that the first three variable types start with a lowercase and they're orange. The second two here that we have as string are red. So what's the difference here? So these first ones, variables, are primitive data types. So when you've got a primitive data type, it basically just holds data. So like it can hold a number, it can hold a character if it's a char variable, it can hold information. Now these ones here are abstract data types. So yes, they do hold data, but they have actions that they can either perform or perform on the data. So they come with a little bag of tricks with them. So it's a little bit more complicated than the standard variable types. Now, what we are also going to create is additional objects. So sometimes these are objects that we are creating. We're going to create some that don't hold data, but they will instead have the purpose of performing actions for us. So in order to create a way to input information, we're going to do it like this. So scanner. So you can see that abstract data types have a capital letter that precede them, or not precede them, that begin their name or type. So we're going to create a scanner. The name of the scanner is going to be named input. And we're going to make it a new scanner. And then we have to send it a parameter that will help it figure out where its data is coming from. So we are going to be, it's going to be receiving information from the system input stream. So we put a system.in here. There are other things that you can have, although this is the only version of scanner we're going to be using. Okay, so breaking down this line, scanner is the class. So it's kind of like the type, and it starts with a capital. Remember that. That's important, is how you can distinguish between what is an abstract data type versus what is a primitive data type. So we've got our input value here. So input, I guess the technical term for this is the label, although I will always be referring to this as the name of the object. So it's the input object. The word new is our constructor, and the scanner system.in. It's kind of like it's like a subprogram that creates it. So it's a program that is within the scanner class that receives a parameter, and then what it does is that decides how the input object is going to be set up. Okay, so let's start doing some user input. Let's first here we're going to prompt for the length and width of our rectangle. So I typically like to do this with a system.out.print, not println. Enter the length, and we'll specify that it is in meters. So the reason I used a print and not a println is I want to have the cursor at the end of this line for when the user is going to type in their length. And the way that we use input is we're going to have the length get the value of input.nextInt. So inside our input object, there's a subprogram or method called nextInt that is going to wait for us to type in an integer, and then it will get stored in the length. I'm going to do the same thing for the width. So enter the width, and then width will become input.nextDouble. So make sure you're using the correct type on this when you're doing your input. So we've got enter the length, enter the width. Down here, let's calculate our perimeter and then display it. So just making sure I created it. So perimeter is going to get the value of 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. Okay. And we'll output the value. So system.out.println, let's say that the perimeter equals plus perimeter. Okay, so if I run the program, we'll verify that we've got everything working here. I am going to enter the length as 4, enter the width as 4.5 because I have that as a double, and then we get our perimeter as 17. Be careful when you're doing input, but for all of these programs, we're going to assume that the user understands what type of value they're going to put in. So if I try to put in a 6.5 for this length, we get an error here because input mismatch exception. There are other ways around this by using next, and then we have to do this extra step to make sure that it's an integer and then turn it into an integer. So we're using this as a bit of a shortcut. We're just always going to assume that the user will know what kind of value to enter. Okay, so now that we've got this, let's deal with our strings. So I'm going to do my name value here. I'm going to start with shape. Let's do that. So I'm in the wrong place down here. I'm going to prompt for shape. So prompt for shape name. So it's going to be similar. Enter the shapes name. So like we'll assume this is rectangle. And then we're going to put shape name here. So shape name is going to become input.nextLine. And that's going to put it in. And down here, to display it, I'm going to go like this. So system.out.print. I'm not going to make this on a line by itself. Let's say shape name and then we'll add on a space because we'll have the shape name and then the word perimeter after it. So I'm going to say rectangle here, 312.1. Okay, so it says rectangle perimeter 30.2. Great. Now what I want to do is, this is where the program gets a little bit weird, is I want to prompt for the name of the person who owns the shape. So I'm going to repeat this down here. Enter the shape's owner. And here I'm going to go name. And after that I've prompted that, I am going to put name. Let's put an apostrophe S because it's their shape. But watch what happens when we run this program. So I'm going to run it. Enter the shape's name. We've got a rectangle. We've got 2 and 7.3. But then what happened here is maybe not what you would expect. We did get our prompt here, but it just bypassed it and then went straight to the output, which is confusing. Okay, so let's actually take a look at what happens. And it has to do with this input stream and how it's handling the data that the object is getting. So for this one, what happens is they enter the shape's name and they put in rectangle. And then they hit enter to enter that value. And this gets recorded. So that's recorded. All right, so now what happens down here is they enter the length. So say they put in something like 3, and then they hit enter, and then the 3 gets recorded. So next int works a little bit differently than next line. So it takes the 3, but there's still something here. So then what happens is this gets passed down to next double. So then what happens is they enter the next double, say it's 11.7, and then they hit enter. This gets stored, but we still have 2 enters left in the input stream sort of access for the object. So then what it does is it comes down here, and as soon as it hits next line, it thinks, oh, great, somebody has already hit enter. I can just go on to the next step. So this is a little bit of an issue when you are going from numbers to text entry. And other programming languages also exhibit this same issue. So here's a quick workaround for this, is what we want to do is we're going to create a separate object just to handle text. So you can name this whatever you want. So we're going to make a second object and we'll call it input text. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use input text everywhere that I have text entry. And then I'm going to do the same thing down here. Okay. So if I run the program now, we will get our rectangle there. I get the length of 2, 11.7. The shape's owner is Mr. Stardom. And then it will say Mr. Stardom's rectangle perimeter equals, and then this value here. Okay, the one last thing that we have to do whenever we're using an input object is we have to close it when we're done with it. So we've got 2 input objects that we've been using. Now the 2 places to do this is either here, so this would be a close option because we're done directly after that, or you can do it at the end of the program. So this is our other close option. So I'm going to do it at the end of the program here, which usually covers me for like if I decide to make some input in the middle that I didn't expect initially. So the way we do this is we're going to close both of them, input.close and input text.close. Close. There we go. And this is another method that's part of the class that will close out those input objects when they are used. So this is how you're going to handle basic text and number entry for your program. So hopefully this is a useful thing. And remember this issue when you're going from entering a number value to entering a text value. So hopefully you remember that in programs where you get that issue going forward.